Hey guys, I wanted to talk to you guys real quick about the role that conspiracy theories played in uh, me initially believing in God and then ultimately having faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is, that I'm a sinner, I deserve to go to hell, uh, but God loves me. And so he sent his only son, Jesus, to live the perfect life that I couldn't live. And then ultimately, I'm going to adjust this, ultimately pay the price for my sins with his blood shed on the cross. And then he was buried and rose again on the third day to prove that his work was indeed accepted by God and that my sins are indeed paid for. And what led me down this path, one of the major things was conspiracy theories. That's not the only thing, but that's one of the things that was in play. Um, One of the major thing that led me to faith in Jesus. I'm gonna close this or open it. We'll see. I'm gonna close it. There we go. Um, One of the probably the main major factor in me coming to faith in Christ is God using my wife. I to even want to step foot in church again since I was a teenager. Um, but conspiracy theories. Let's get back to that. Okay. So the interesting thing is people, have a whole different people have different views on conspiracy theorists based on their political ideology, which is interesting. But here's the funny part: the misconception of people who are conspiracy theorists or whatever you want to call them. I won't get into. Well, I will real quick. The name conspiracy theorist was actually devised in the 1970s by the CIA to discredit people who were calling out things that were wrong in the government. Anyway, so even the name conspiracy theorist in itself has this whole slew of problems or whatever. But a lot of us who are considered conspiracy theorists like to call ourselves truthers. But here's the main. Let me break this down. It's not that hard, and it's not as crazy or tinfoil hat as you would think it is. A conspiracy theorist is a person who, like, let's say there's an official narrative that the government puts out, right? The narrative is we are going to war against country A because blah, blah, blah. Most of the time it's like freedom, democracy, whatever. We don't want to fight them on our soil, so we're going to go over there and fight the war, right? Whatever the story is, okay? This is just one narrative, and it's just an example. So a conspiracy theorist is simply this: a person who sees the official story and they call BS. They raise the bullshit flag, right? They say, you know what? I think that there is an objective, that there is an agenda that's behind the scenes that is more nefarious. Generally, it has to do with people making money, right? It's kind of funny. Dick Cheney, when we went to war, and when we, for some reason, we're in Afghanistan, then all of a sudden we shoot over and we're going to Iraq, right? Because they have weapons of mass destruction, which they never found any, right? But that was the official story. So a conspiracy theorist is a person who looks at the official story and then they look and they go, well, what's interesting is like Dick Cheney was the president of Halliburton for a long, long time. And Halliburton got the big contract over there, and they're making cajillions of taxpayer dollars by us going to war there. And who knows who else is getting kickbacks, whose buddies are making money on the side, this and that. So are we really going over there for weapons of mass destruction? So that really is all that a conspiracy theorist is someone who does not buy the official story of the government or a particular person or a corporation, right? They look and they go, you know what? They're putting this front on, but I bet you behind the scenes, there's an actual different reason that we're going to war, or that everyone has to be vaccinated, right? Which we found out now. Everyone was crazy who wouldn't get the vaccine. Now look, now people who've got the vaccine are having heart attacks and whatever. And, big pharmaceutical made hundreds of billions of dollars. Now all of a sudden, we're not so crazy, to believe that there are some things behind the scenes that maybe we should question, and that is apart from the official story, right? This benevolent, like, we're going to come up with this vaccine to save everyone, and it's all for the good of humanity, right? We know better now. And that is all a conspiracy theorist is, really, if you break it down, is someone who doesn't buy the official narrative of whoever or whatever, and looks behind the scenes to find motives and stuff like that maybe aren't made public, to find out, like, the truth behind the matter, right? Why are we really going to war in Iraq? Why does really everyone have to get this vaccine that hasn't been tested on people? Whatever it is. Those are just like recent ones that are big, right? Like 9/11's a big one, right? Why really these two planes crashed into these buildings that are made of steel beams on the outside, like, and completely the buildings that are made, to withstand these crazy earthquakes and this and that. And the entire outside of them is made of steel, like solid steel I-beams. That's why the windows are all narrow like that, because there's literally I-beams going all the way up, like steel I-beams. So we crashed. So these terrorists crashed a couple of beer cans with some jet fuel into, basically an airplane is nothing more than a beer can with some wings and some fuel. So they smashed these airplanes through these giant steel buildings, and the steel buildings just collapsed, free falled to the ground. Really? So that's all a conspiracy theorist is. They question the official story. So don't think they're like crazy people or paranoid people. Well, some of them are. But anyway, that's all it is. So how did conspiracy theories play a part or a role in my faith in Jesus Christ that I have today? It started a long time ago when I was a teenager, and I'd looked at a book before on the New World Order, right? You hear George Bush Sr. say that phrase a lot, made it kind of popular. And it was all this stuff about symbols and Freemasons and like the pyramid on the back of the dollar, and microchipping people's hands and this and that. And it kind of fascinated me, but it wasn't something I really looked into too much. Then what really stuck and came full circle later was my pastor's son. His name was Tony. He's still alive. Great guy. I see him like maybe once every 5 years or something. Every now and then I run into the guy. Maybe even a little bit longer than that. I don't know. I don't remember the last time I saw him. But anyhow, he got cancer, and he was going to get chemo and radiation, and the chemo and the radiation was killing him. So one day outside of the cancer clinic, now this is a story I heard. I could be a little bit wrong on it, but the point still remains. They ran into a guy who told them that he had been cured of cancer. Don't waste your time on chemotherapy and radiation. Go down to Mexico because there's a treatment center there for people with cancer. And it's illegal in the United States, but it cures you of cancer. So they went down to Tijuana to this cancer treatment place. And eventually, Tony was cured of cancer through the use of this cancer treatment clinic down in Mexico. And it was amazing. And what always struck me and what always stuck in my head and circled around to me later was that how could a cancer treatment that is curing people, I saw it with I know the guy. We're not best buds or anything. I haven't seen him in years, but I saw it with my own eyes. This guy got cured of cancer, and it was illegal in the United States. How could that be? That always stuck in my head. Like, because I was raised, and not really raised, but I kind of automatically assumed, the TV movie, patriotic narrative that the government is this benevolent, selfless force to represent humanity in the United States, and look out for our greater good and this and that. And so it always struck me as funny how a cure for cancer that I had actually seen work in a person, cure them of cancer, how that could be illegal in the United States. That blew my mind. And so many years later, I meet my wife. I'm an alcoholic, whatever. She said she was praying for a godly man, and I showed up on her doorstep, right? I was not a godly man. So I started going to church, because my wife said, well, at the time she was my girlfriend. She said, "You're really cool, but I don't want to be with a guy like you. I want to be with someone who loves God and this and that." And I said, I said to myself, maybe this drinking thing and partying and being stupid stuff, that hasn't really done me any good. So maybe I should try this. So I decided to quit drinking, start going to church. And while I was going to church and stuff, I started looking into again the full circle thing of medicine, like natural cures and things like that, just because I'd always kind of been, my mom, when I was a kid, had subscribed to these like herbal magazines, and I'd always been fascinated with reading these about all these herbs and natural cures and stuff like that for whatever reason. And so I started looking into it again. I found this guy's a con artist now, a legit one. But I found I think his name was Kevin Trudeau, I think. And he had a book called Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About, right? And it turns out basically the guy was a scam artist. And I think he's in prison right now. But it got me back on that kick of like thinking like, okay, why doesn't the government want people to know? Why doesn't the government, who's looking out for our best interests, supposedly, want people to know about like medicines and natural cures for things and this and that? And, so I started going down that rabbit hole. And eventually, as many conspiracy theorists will tell you, I stumbled across a guy named Alex Jones. A lot of people have heard of him. And I started looking into him, and I started listening to stuff and, the New World Order, and these people want to take over and have a one world government, consolidate all the world governments and this and that. And I'm like, wow, that's freaking crazy, dude. But I started listening and I started researching it, and I was like, wow, interesting. And eventually what I learned on this journey of like looking into all these conspiracy theories and this and that, and there's the Freemasons, and then it's the Jesuits, and then it's blah, 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 right? The Knights of Malta, all these like secret societies and this and that. And what I eventually came to realize is this whole thing, if it is true, right? All these people working behind the scenes to consolidate all the world governments into one world government and stuff like that. What I realized is two things. It's very interesting. I realized that it is a religious movement. All of these people have religious beliefs driving them towards this goal, right? And even if you look at the United Nations, some of the main advisors, if you start doing your research on the United Nations and the Council on Foreign Relations and things like that, are occultists, are famous occultists, right? Alice Bailey, the chick who invented the false religion of theosophy, I forgot her name, but anyway, Helena Abramovich or something like that. Anyway, all these people behind the scenes, these government officials and everything that are all pushing to this consolidate all the world governments into one, all of these people have religious undertones to them. And the crazy thing is they are all negative. Like they are all against Christianity. And ultimately, against freedom of humanity, and they want to wipe out a lot of people. That's what I've come to the conclusion of, and I'm like, well, why? So I started thinking, so if there's all these evil people that want to basically consolidate all the world governments and have one world government, and they're all religious, and then I read like I've heard stories in the Bible and stuff, and I read the Bible when I was younger, and the Bible in the book of Revelation, which is the last book of the Bible, and it talks about what's going to happen in the end times before Jesus comes back and Judgment Day happens, right? It talks about what's going to happen on earth. Well, it's interesting because in the Bible it says that there's a person who comes along called the Antichrist, and this person unites the world into a one world government. And I just found that really interesting. And at the same time, I was taking, this is like the first time I dropped out of college. I dropped out of college a few times. But I was taking a philosophy survey class, right? And I came across a couple of names that really stood out to me because of some quotes that I read by him and stuff. And that was Thomas Aquinas, and it was Rene Descartes. So I started reading these guys on my own, just because out of curiosity, and ultimately between realizing the entire world is actually has this religious undertone to it, like the politics, everything, like good versus evil, like you see it in the world today, and especially right now, you see it more than you see it when I was younger, like 10, 15 years ago. I forget now. I was like 28 when I got saved. I'm 40, almost 42. So, but you see it more now. The evil is definitely rearing its ugly head. And what's funny is it's actually pretending to be good, and it's painting the good as evil, right? People with Christian values and believe in family and marriage and morality and things like that. And like, you don't harm children, you just let kids be kids and things like that. These people are deemed as evil, bad guys, blah, blah, blah. And then, and then the evil people that are immoral and living disgusting lives and miserable and glorifying suicide and sexual immorality on so many levels you can't even imagine. These people are deemed as good. It's insane. And it's interesting because in the book of Isaiah, it says, woe unto them who put darkness for light and light for dark, and who put good for evil and evil for good and bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter, right? Basically turning everything upside down on its head, right? But anyway, realizing all of this stuff, that really politics is just a guise for a religious war. Politics is not just politics. It is a guise to keep people guessing and not understanding, and it's to disguise basically the fact that this is a good versus evil thing. This is, and it's throughout the whole world, but especially in American politics right now. And it was back when I was 28 as well, but not even close to the level it is now. But so anyway, with all of that, I thought, well, if this whole world is actually moving in this religious undertone, I mean, they're disguising the fact that it is religious, right? They're putting it out as politics and policy and blah, blah, blah. But if you get to the root of it, it's good versus evil, and it's religious. There's a war on Christianity, and it's very apparent. When I realized this, I went, well, there must be a God then, And at the time, I am hanging out with my now wife, who was my girlfriend then, and we're going to church, and I'm reading Rene Descartes, and I'm reading Thomas Aquinas, who obviously is the father of like modern day Catholic theology, right? And so I'm starting to read these guys, and I'm like, man, there's got to be a God. There's no way around it. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I started also at the same time, I had a guy at work who was a former Christian, and he was like this devout neo-atheist, right? He liked Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and all these guys. And so he found out I became a Christian, or was leaning that way. And hold on a minute. Um, and so he would challenge me every day, like, oh yeah, well, if you believe in God, what about this? Or what about that? And he'd bring up all these, weird pseudoscience like facts. And I'd go, well, I don't know, but I'll go home and I'll research it and I'll bring you an answer. And so the combination of all that stuff with the conspiracy theory stuff, realizing that the whole world had, and especially politics in the United States, had this whole undertone of like good versus evil, and starting to realize that there is a God, and being challenged by this guy at work and going and looking up, getting it really into apologetics, which is like learning like the sort of science and everything, and basically like critical theory about the Bible, and like or textual criticism is what it's called, and stuff like that, and looking into the Bible texts and how it's obvious that the Bible texts, that at least the Textus Receptus from the King James version, right, is legit. I mean, but anyway, the combination of all this stuff, I finally was like, you know what, there is a God, and it's the God of the Bible. And I a little while later, I was reading a book by the old English preacher Charles Spurgeon, who preached in England in the 1800s. Anyway, and he went through the gospel in this book. And one night I'm sitting there reading it, and he goes through sin and like how we're sinners. And then he goes through like how God is righteous and just. And he shows in the Bible how God is righteous and just and will punish the wicked and so on and so forth. And I was like, wow, I deserve to go to hell. I've sinned against God, and God rules everything. He rules the entire world. He makes the laws. He makes the rules. And as much as I'm a free agent, I am owned by God. He owns everything. He owns this whole world. He owns you. He owns me. He owns it all. He created it. He created us. And I was like, man, I deserve everlasting hell. I do, because I've sinned. I've sinned against God in so many ways. It's ridiculous. But then he went through the message of how God loves us and he doesn't want us to perish. And he made a way for us to be saved from his judgment. And that is through faith in the person and work of Jesus Christ, right? That Jesus was born a virgin, lived a perfect life according to God's laws. He obeyed God's laws perfectly, the laws that we don't obey, the laws I still don't obey to this day, even though I'm saved, right? I'm still a sinner. But he lived that perfect life, and then he was crucified on the cross, and his blood that was shed was for the remission of my sins. That satisfied the justice of God towards my sins, towards the sins of the whole world. And all I have to do to be saved is have faith on him, believe on him. And so I did. It was this light switch, like boom. And it was like almost, and this is kind of funny because we're talking about Christianity, but it was a Zen moment, right? It was like, oh, like this enlightenment moment or moment of sobriety, whatever you want to call it, where I was just like, oh, I get it now. Like there's nothing I can do to save myself. I can't be a good enough person. I can't volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club and at the Senior Citizens Club. And if I do all these good deeds or whatever, eventually, God's going to see that and I'm going to be allowed into heaven. No, that's not it. It's that Jesus paid the price for my sins. I don't deserve to go to heaven, but I'm going to because I have faith that Jesus already took the punishment that I deserve when he died on the cross. It's that simple. It really is. But anyway, so that's kind of the story of how conspiracy theories played a large role in my coming to faith in Jesus Christ. Now, there's a lot more to it. I'm still definitely an avid conspiracy theorist, you would say, but that eventually just seeing the religious undertone of everything and realizing, looking beyond the politics, beyond the policy, beyond the CNN and Fox and blah, 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 and realizing, dude, this is a good versus evil in this world. And it's very apparent. And when you see that and you look at the religious beliefs, you can find quotes of all these people too, from the UN to presidents to whoever. They are all have this religious belief that they need to consolidate all the world governments into one. And what really made me think about that is the Bible says in the end times before Christ comes that there will be a one world government. And I was like, wow, that is, the Bible's like warning us way ahead of time what's going to go down here. And so to me, that made the Bible very real to me. And eventually that's what brought me to faith in Jesus Christ. Anyway, on the thumbnail, if you guys don't know who those guys are, they both have podcasts, and it's Sam Tripoli from Tinfoil Hat Podcast. And the other guy is like a hero of mine. He's a big like flat earth guy and like really big into a lot of conspiracy theories that I am and stuff. And his name is Eddie Bravo. And he's actually on the Joe Rogan podcast quite a bit. But that's who the guys are in the thumbnail if you don't recognize them. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'm glad to be able to share with you.